But guys, instead of d4, in this position, white must consider capturing this knight on d5. This is because after bishop takes d5, now we can go for d4, attacking this pawn as well as also opening the diagonal of this dark square bishop. And if takes, queen takes d4, and if black tries to attack this queen by knight to c6, simply we can move our queen to a4, which pins this knight. And to unpin this, if queen to d7, now we can play e4, attacking this bishop, and clearly you can see that this position will be better for white. Okay, so in the actual game, after d4, and after that, here Karpov brings his rook to e1 so that he can push e4, and the best way to stop this is simply bishop to e4, which would be a great outpost for this bishop, but instead he decides to capture on d4. And after takes, now it's better for black to just develop this bishop to e7 so that he can easily castle. But he made a mistake by playing bishop to b4. But why this move is a mistake? I mean, it attacks this rook. But guys, here black forgets that now white can bring his bishop to g5, which attacks this queen. And if black plays f6, then it opens this h5 diagonal, and you can see that it will create some weakness over this h5 diagonal. And suppose if he decides to bring back this bishop to e7, then what's the point of bringing it to b4? Basically it's a wasted move, so that's why this move is a mistake. Okay, so in the actual game, after bishop to b4, here black continues the game with f6. Yeah, sorry, f6. But guys, here white must consider queen to e3, trying to attack this weak e6 pawn. And guys, in this position, Karpov sacrificed his knight with the knight to g5, which also opens the diagonal of this bishop. And here white is also threatening to mate on h7 square. So that's why here black is forced to capture this knight. And after this, bishop takes b7. And by this, you can see that now black gets this double pawn structure, which is very bad. And since this rook is under attack, but here, instead of defending this, black finds the best move, knight to c5, threatening to capture this queen, and black is also attacking this bishop on b7. Okay, so now Karpov decides to bring his rook to a5, completely taking over this fifth rank so that he can eye over these pawns if black pushed this in future. In this position, now it's better for black to just push this g6 so that he can tackle these pawns, but instead he decides to bring his king to f6, which is an inaccuracy because now white can push h5, which advances the white pawns and also covers this g6 square. But instead he goes for f4, and again here black has option to push g6, but he also made a mistake again by rook to b7, and again white has option to just push this pawn to h5 as I mentioned earlier, but Karpov decides to bring his king to f3, and yeah, same idea that black has now again this option of playing g6 so that he can stop these rockets, but here black missed this again, and now Karpov can play h5, which I mentioned earlier, but he again missed this and goes for rook to a6, which pins this pawn. But now finally here black finds the best move, g6, which stops any further pawn push. Okay, so now it's important for black to bring this rook to e7 so that he can support this e6 pawn, which can be pushed in future. But instead, he made a mistake by playing rook to b7. This is because now Karpov instantly pushed h5. Right, and here black cannot push this, and here black cannot capture this h5 pawn. This is because after rook takes h5, king to g6, but simply rook to a5, and at the end you can see that black is left over with these isolated pawns, whereas white has these three connected pawns, which will definitely crush the black position. Okay, so that is why after the move h5, here black decides to push g5. Okay, so everything was fine till here, but From this position, can you find the winning move for white? Pause the video and try to find it by yourself. I think most of you got the move. Yes, you are right. The move is g5. This is because suppose after takes, f takes g5, and if black gives a check, simply king to f4. If rook to b4 check, king to e3, rook to b3 check, king to d4, rook to b4 check, king to c5, and if he tries to stop our pawn, simply rook takes a7 check, king to g8, rook to a8 check, king to h7, g6 check, king to h6, rook to h8 check, king to g7, attacking this rook, but simply rook to h7 check, king to g8, king to d6, and I think now all of you understand that now this is over for black. But in the actual game, after king to f7, here Karpov missed this move g5, and instead he plays rook to a4, and you know that by this position, and now this position is equal. This is because of this crazy move, which is the only move to save this game, and the move is to play a6, trying to deflect this rook, and if rook takes a6, so that we can give a check from b3 square. And suppose if king goes to h4, which is the only best option for this king, okay, and now you can see that after this we can go for rook to b4, attacking this f4 pawn, and obviously white cannot push this pawn to f5 because then white pawn structure get compromised. And if white defends this f4 pawn by his king, then we can give a check again by our rook, and yeah, you can see we can repeat this sequence again and again because white has no option to go and he has to go to h4 square. So by this, you can see that this game automatically becomes equal. Okay, so in the actual game, after rook to a4, obviously black missed that move and instead he played king to g7. And yeah, after that, Karpov goes for g5. And in this position, the final move by Karpov is rook to a6 check, and in this position, Vlastimil Hort resigned. This is because if king to g7, then white will capture this rook. And suppose if black defends this check by rook to e6, now white can simply push this pawn to g7. And since this pawn is close to promotion, so that is why black is forced to capture this pawn, but after that simply rook takes e6, and yeah, that's all. Like this video and also make sure to subscribe to this channel. This is your host Bison signing off. Bye bye.